Good evening. I speak from several vantage points this evening. I speak as a homeowner within Onondaga territory, as a parent in this community, and as a community activist. And in all of those roles, I believe there are ways that our community as a whole and we as Central New Yorkers can benefit from a respectful, negotiated settlement of the Onondaga land rights action. Of course, there are tremendous environmental benefits that have been talked about a lot. Wendy spoke about some of them, as did Dee. The cleanup of Onondaga Lake, a lake that can be a value, a treasure of the community, rather than something that we stay away from because of the dangers that it poses. The cleanup of Onondaga Creek, preventing future environmental degradation, and learning to live more respectfully with the entire natural world. As a homeowner, I've seen the uncertainty, the fear, and the racism which have arisen to the east and the west of Syracuse, as people just like those of us in this room have reacted to the Oneida and Cayuga land claims. And the Onondagas do not use the phrase land claim. They talk about land rights action. And that's very important because they're not seeking to claim anyone's land. They are seeking to have it recognized legally that they never gave up their title to this land, that the land was taken from them illegally, and as a result, that gives them certain rights. But in their mind, those rights don't include kicking people off the land. As I've traveled through Cayuga County and Oneida County and seen the signs saying no sovereign nation, it saddens me as I see people trying to deny history, to deny what has happened in our name. We've already benefited by the fact that the Onondagas have been clear that they won't evict anyone from their homes. We can benefit further as we move forward to seek to resolve this in a fair way that eliminates any cloud of fear which hangs over people's homes, people's futures in this community. A negotiated settlement would also mean that we wouldn't waste millions of dollars in court fees, that instead of our tax dollars lining the pockets of attorneys, some of whom are good and some of whom aren't so good, that money could be used to support grassroots efforts at the kind of discussion and dialogue that Bea talked about, which could lead us to mutually beneficial solutions. That money could go to settlements, to cleaning up polluted areas, to providing resources to the Onondagas so that they could increase their land base as they need to if their community is to grow and thrive. If we respond to the Onondagas with the same commitment to healing and reconciliation in which they have acted, words that Bea quoted from earlier, we can also open the doors of our region to development which is truly based on environmental sustainability, rather than buying into the myth of a so-called green mall as the answer to our economic problems. While none of the claims which have been filed by Haudenosaunee nations have been settled, there have been negotiated settlements in other parts of the country to native land claims, ranging all the way from Washington State to Maine. They've typically involved recognition of native sovereignty and the provision of additional land and/or money for the native people involved. None of these settlements has been ideal, and obviously the specific circumstances vary from one community to another. But they do provide some guidance and some hope that a positive resolution, a resolution through sitting, through negotiating, through discussion is possible. As a parent, I want my 3-year-old son Eli to grow up in a community that's willing to face our history, the good parts of that history and the bad parts, and to do what we can to redress injustices, whether they occurred yesterday or several hundred years ago. I want our schools to teach him about the proud and noble history of the Haudenosaunee Confederacy and about the current state of the nation just south of Syracuse. I want Eli to see the example of people seeking justice, not just for themselves, but for all people. I want him to understand that we must live up to our commitments, individually and collectively. In this case, the treaties, which were signed by our forebears of the United States with the Onondagas and the other Haudenosaunee nations. And one of the repeated issues which has really struck me, which has come up in the previous programs, is the completely different sort of model for social organization among the Haudenosaunee people. Our model is very hierarchical, very based on rank, on privilege. Their model is much more level. It's based on people working together. There are people who have different responsibilities from others, but they don't necessarily have more power. And clearly the social problems that we face are, in my mind, directly linked to that kind of hierarchy, of injustice, of lack of shared power. So that's an area that I think that we really have a great deal to learn from the Onondagas. And my hope is that as they see more and more people reaching out in openness to resolve this issue, that they'll feel more comfortable sharing with the larger community, something which historically I think they have been hesitant to do for very good reason in my mind. As an activist, I recognize that our world is in great peril. We stand on the precipice of environmental and social catastrophes which threaten our very existence. Those of us living in a nation whose military, political, and economic power is perhaps unrivaled in world history have great power to avert these crises, even as we often feel very powerless and as the government and corporate leaders work very hard to make us feel powerful, to convince us that we can't do anything, that we can't fight City Hall. Fortunately, there's a few people in City Hall like me who we don't necessarily have to fight.
Some days stronger than others, right?
By opening ourselves up to feeling the pain which our nation, our state, and our community have inflicted upon the Onondagas, we can also begin to see the struggles of other people who have suffered in our own city and halfway across the world. We need such open vision to create a safe and sustainable future. We live in a region which has played a vital role in various important social movements, the abolition of slavery, women's rights, and more. Although I was one of the people who helped to develop the theme of tonight's program, Onondaga Land Rights All Central New Yorkers Can Benefit, I wonder if abolitionists ever held similar programs 160 years ago. Or instead, did they simply make the case that slavery was inhumane and that all decent people had a responsibility to end it? I recognize that it's often important for people to see some personal benefit to changes which are being suggested. However, it's clear that all but a tiny parcel of the land of the Onondaga Nation was taken illegally and immorally several hundred years ago. And it is simply the right thing to do to acknowledge that crime and seek to redress it in the limited ways which we are able. As we learned a couple of months ago in the other larger theater just down the hallway from John Mohawk, significant aspects of modern democracy, which has spread to many corners of the world, were developed only miles from here on the shore of Onondaga Lake. Perhaps through the hard work of concerned people like those of us in this room, a new movement can be born, which seeks to right historic wrongs, to find ways to renew sustainable relationships with our natural environment, and to renew democracy can be born right here in central New York. Thank you.